This is Between the Uprights. Football is life. The rest is just details. Here are your hosts, Joe, Matt, and Chris.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Between the Uprights. I am here with Chris. My name is Matt. And just real quick before we get into all this Week 12 NFL discussion, be sure to subscribe to the channel for us. We are just starting this thing up here at Between the Uprights. We love football. We love the NFL. And if you're seeing this, you probably do too. So if you like what you see, hitting that subscribe button would be extremely clutch for us. We would greatly appreciate it. And thank you in advance. Now, let's go to the Bay Area as the Niners are struggling. The Brock Purdy-less 49ers got boat raced in Green Bay last Sunday, 38-10. The offense never got in rhythm. The defense got cooked by Josh Jacobs, and the Niners dropped to 5-6, falling to a tie for last place in the NFC West, and they are in danger of the classic Super Bowl hangover, going from Super Bowl to missing the playoffs. But our topic on San Francisco is even more of a big picture topic than if this team will make or miss the playoffs in 2024, because this team, as of late, has been, outside of the Chiefs, the premier team in football for about a half decade now, with the obviously their core of players and Kyle Shanahan controlling the NFC throughout that period of time. But now with how this season has went and the Niners cap situation going forward and just the overall state of the roster, Chris, the real question is, did the Niners miss their chance? Is their Super Bowl window officially closed?
So there's probably going to be a lot of upset individuals in this case, because I do believe that's a yes. And what I'll say is that when we're talking about if they're out of the if they're out of that ability now, if they've lost that chance for their current roster, is where I would like to kind of say that. So for their current roster, we have some heavy hitters. And we've seen, like, we've seen Kittle, we've seen Samuel. You know, we've seen several players who have been kind of the bread and butter of the 49ers for the last few years. And just like you said, like, they've been in the NFC Championships for the last 5 years. You know, so it's kind of been given to them almost similar. Like you said, almost similar to the Chiefs, where it's almost like starting the season, they're kind of like, hey, you can kind of just write them in. We already know they're going to be there. Where my concern is now coming in is that we know probably more than likely they're not making the playoffs this year, right? So then you have to look at what's going to happen during the offseason, because you have to now pay your new quarterback, right? So he has to get paid. So you're going to have to pay him about where it's at, which I'll obviously I haven't looked it up yet. So about where I would assume probably in the 50 million range, right? I mean, that's what. Never mind. I'm not going to say his name. The Giants are probably still upset about that.
Yeah.
Right. So they have to pay him. Then you have a George Kittle, you know, your highest tight end, and someone who is just kind of like, I feel like the bread and butter almost of your offense, and he also needs a new contract. Are they going to be able to pay him enough to keep him there is going to be the biggest question. Because what I feel I could possibly see potentially, and I'm not saying it's a yes or no, but potentially I could see him going to KC, because Travis Kelce has already kind of put up there that he may be retiring. And if Kittle really wants his biggest thing is he wants to go for a chip, that's where he's going to go.
Wow.
So if you're missing George Kittle, and personally, a lot of people probably are not gonna like this, and I understand it, but I think they overpaid their wide receiver, and I think he is underperformed. Prior to him even getting hurt in week 7, he's already underperformed. So you have a overpaid wide receiver one who, in my opinion, you know, even his first couple years there, I don't feel like he really plays as a wide receiver one. I feel like he has been helped by other players. So he was able to kind of get the amount of yards that he was able to get because of the people around him. So now when you're depending on him, I don't feel like that should be giving you any calls for like, yeah, that's our guy. He doesn't give me that's my guy feeling personally. And now you have, you know, a rookie wide receiver as well, who I'm big on just for the fact of what he's overcome and the way that he has gotten past adversity, I can respect the hell out of that. But we still don't know what he's going to become. So you have him coming into his second year, don't really know what you have there. Now you have a Deebo Samuel who was also underperformed this year, who's also going to need a contract and more than likely is going elsewhere. So you've already lost some really big names, and then I'm not even going to get to the defensive side of the ball. So just talking about the offense, is there's going to be some struggles there. So we don't know what exactly is going to happen with that. And as much as I love Brock Purdy, and again, you hate it, it is what it is. He, to me, he's just not a big time guy, right? To me, he's a middle of the pack kind of guy. Not saying there's anything wrong with that. There's plenty of quarterbacks who have gone their entire career and they are really just run of the mill type of guys. They run certain offenses. It's easy to go. They make sure that they stay above the chains. Like they do the things the right way, right? But he's not going to basically not going to call any wrecks to the game, but he's also not going to take those games over. So, for instance, if you're looking at someone and you're saying, "Hey, it's fourth quarter, we have 2 minutes on the clock, we're down by a touchdown, we need you to go win the game." I haven't seen that from him yet. So, not seeing that from him makes me concerned as far as what's next for this team. And I think that's going to come back to after the season is over, when you're looking at after the season, you're looking at free agency, you're looking at the draft. I think that's going to give us an idea of maybe of what they're looking into. But as far as their standings and as far as their ability to be kind of top Super Bowl contenders, I think that right now is completely gone. Personally.
Yeah. I mean, listen, Chris, to your one of your first points that you talked about as far as their standing this season, like I'll just address that quick. I'm not going to completely pencil them out of the playoff picture just because they're only a game back of the division at this point. The division leaders 6-5, they're 5-6. Even the Commanders are up there at 7-5 for the 7 seed in the wild card, so they're still alive for it. And they have, obviously, the championship pedigree. They still have a lot of really talented players on their team. I know Mike Shanahan. Geez, like it's the 2000s Broncos. Good Lord. Kyle Shanahan, the head coach of the 49ers, obviously has a great regular season track record. He's a great regular season football coach. He does a great job with that team in the regular season. But then you look at their schedule. They go at Buffalo. They're home to the Bears. Then it's Rams, at Dolphins, home to the Lions, and then at Cardinals. So there's not maybe you can pencil in the Bears as a win at this point, but there's not a single other game on that schedule that you're going to be able to pencil in as a win. And those are going to be hard-fought, tough games. And you're a banged-up football team already if they're the San Francisco 49ers. So I'm not counting them out as far as playoffs goes, but that's not me saying they're going to make the playoffs. I'm definitely not betting on them making the playoffs. I don't have them making the playoffs right now, as of now. So right now they're standing as far as this year goes, they're in trouble. And then you talked about it, Chris, going forward, they're in trouble too. I mean, you talked about Brock Purdy as far as the term that a lot of people use for quarterbacks. Is he a force multiplier, right? Can he make the players around him better? I think Brock Purdy is a good player. He's Tua. We just talked about Tua in a previous segment. Brock Purdy and Tua have a lot of similarities. Neither has a bigger arm. Tua's probably a tiny bit more accurate. Purdy's probably a little bit more athletic, but they're similar players, right? If the players around them are good, if they're in a good system, they're going to look really, really good. But if their players around them are hurt or if they're banged up, we've seen Purdy not look as good this year. His numbers aren't as good this year when the players around him have been banged up. So, and you're going to have to pay that guy $50 million. I don't think anybody liked Daniel Jones getting $40 million, but Daniel Jones, I didn't like him getting paid a lot of money. I didn't really even like Kirk Cousins getting paid a lot of money. I certainly didn't like Dak Prescott getting paid a lot of money. So it's like those quarterbacks who I think for me, if I'm the general manager of a franchise, the quarterbacks who are getting paid most are the quarterbacks who should be getting those big contracts. The only quarterbacks I'd be giving those big contracts to are the Josh Allens, the Patrick Mahomeses, the Lamar Jacksons, the Justin Herberts, the Joe Burrows, the guys who like, hey, this guy can take us over the top. This guy, even if he's getting paid $50 million, he can win us a Super Bowl, right? If you're paying Brock Purdy $50 million, I don't think you're going to be able to win a Super Bowl with that roster. And I think that's the decision you're going to eventually have to make if you're the San Francisco 49ers. And then you just go down through the rest of the roster. Like Christian McCaffrey, he hasn't looked the same after missing a bunch of the season this year, and he's had a bunch of other injuries accumulate throughout his career. So you're worried about his future going forward. You talked about Deebo Samuel. He's not going to be there next year. Deebo's been terrible the last 2 seasons. You watch him play, he does not look like the same player he was from a few years back when he was a first-team All-Pro. George Kittle, he's 31, and if he ends up going to the Chiefs, I don't see that happening at all. But if he ends up going to the Chiefs, like, stop the game, like turn the game off, like to unplug the PlayStation, like the game's over, like we need to stop. It's just ridiculous. But he's 31 years old, and I love George Kittle. He's one of my favorite players in the NFL. He seems like a great dude. But again, once you start getting past that 30 age in the NFL, if you're not a quarterback, that's when you start to kind of slowly see things take off. So I'm a little bit nervous about George Kittle. Trent Williams is 36. Trent Williams, one of the best players in the NFL, the best left tackle in the NFL, is 36. How many more great years does he have left? And then you go through the rest of the roster. Again, they have so many players who are injured on injured reserve right now with season-ending injuries, too. You talked about Brandon Ayuk. Javon Hargrave got hurt early in the year. Their big defensive tackle, Dre Greenlaw, was hurt in the Super Bowl last year. He's out for the season. Hufanga, he's out for the season, too. So how are those guys going to come back next year after being out for this entire season with a major injury? So these are all massive, massive questions that I have about the San Francisco 49ers. And then the number one question that I have that one of my Bay Area friends was talking to me about like last week. He's like, oh, people are really getting on Shanahan now. I was like, I could have told you to get on Shanahan 5 years ago, because when shit gets tight in the NFL, when shit gets tight in sports, you see who the real players are, who the real coaches are, who the guys who you can really trust are. Kyle Shanahan ain't one of them. I'm sorry, San Francisco 49ers fans. He's not. He will never be. You cannot trust him in big situations. And how do I know that? I don't know, maybe his entire resume. Literally his entire resume through his entire career, you haven't been able to trust him. 28-3 as the offensive coordinator for the Falcons in the Super Bowl. The 10-point lead against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. The other 10-point lead against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. Like, it just continuously happens to Kyle Shanahan. So if the head coach ain't right and you have a lot of question marks with your roster, and right now you're not having success at all, like, I don't see it for the Niners in the future. I just don't see it. So, yeah, it's going to be really, really tough for the Niners to overcome all of this drama and all this adversity, and their head coach not being that guy, in my opinion, Chris.
I really can't say I disagree with anything that was just said, to be honest with you. I think that's pretty much the blunt of it, is that they had a really good run. They had a really good opportunity. Hell, they got to the Super Bowl twice against the same team. You would hope for at least the second time around to knock it out, but you still didn't get there. So then, obviously, then there you come into the question of, was that a coaching issue, not necessarily just your players, because it always starts with the coaches. So at this point, it's just like it's hard to see, but I do think that their fairy tale ride to the NFC Championship, the last 4 of the 5 years, getting to the Super Bowl, based on the roster that they have, like with those specific players, I think that fairy tale Super Bowl run is done.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. They kind of feel like the 90s Bills, where they had a bunch of different opportunities to win Super Bowls. They had the team. They went for it. Like, you got to give the Niners and their organization credit for going for it. But, you sometimes you go for it, and sometimes you swing, sometimes you get stopped on 4th down. And that's what happened with the Niners as a whole. So, it's not looking good, Niners fans. The outcome, the future isn't looking good. And we'll see how it plays out here in the future.
This has been Between the Uprights. Football is life. The rest is just details.